of your own citizens.
Just incredible.
That's a very
I
unfair.
am not, and we are not.
Those are my questions.
That, of course, was the great Eva Chipiuk, Alberta lawyer, who worked on behalf of the Freedom Convoy and still is. And she's a voice for freedom. We're going to be talking to Eva in about 8 or 9 minutes when she joins the show. We're going to be talking about how she was debanked from the RBC. We're going to talk about the Freedom Convoy sentencing hearing last week and a couple of other things of interest to you. When we come back, we'll be talking about the latest from Mark Carney. Join us, won't you?
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Well, thanks for watching. Really appreciate your subscriptions. We're over 60,000 and moving ever onward upwards. Thank you so much for your support. It's merchandise week here. That's why I'm wearing the hat and the shirt. I love this shirt. Creighton's right in nobody's pocket. And if you listen to this show on a daily basis, I think you know that's true. I will criticize any political party, any political leader, if I think they are straying from principled conservatism and straying from the truth, is something I think we have to be careful to acknowledge. So what we showed that clip there from the Emergencies Act inquiry, and that's where I first met Eva Chipiuk. And I thought nobody more effectively humiliated Prime Minister Justin Trudeau than Eva in this wonderful moment. And I've got another clip to show you just before Eva comes on the show to illustrate how effective she was in cornering Justin Trudeau about his invocation of the Emergencies Act, which Judge Mosley ruled was unconstitutional and unnecessary. The government of Canada appealed that decision, of course. And, you know, we've never really heard a result of that. And I think we can possibly go to our main news story here in a minute before Eva comes on the show. But it's very important, I think, to mention what is going on here. I'm sorry, I'm just Mark Carney, of course, just before, and this is what's significant here, just before the deadline for the August 1st deadline for the tariff dispute with President Donald Trump, announces he's going to support and recognize an independent Palestinian state. Now, whether or not you agree with that, and I acknowledge Israel is guilty of some grave offenses in Gaza. However, this is not a good time to talk about this days before you sit down and Donald Trump finally releases his decision on how Canada is going to fare. And this is, of course, Mark Carney at his best, distracting you from his failure to put Canada first, his failure to be Canada strong, his failure as a prime minister. That's all this is about. And it's absolutely astonishing to me that Mark Carney thinks he can get away with this, because this has gone over really not very well. And here's Mark Carney's letter announcing Canada has long been committed to a two-state solution, an independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state, living side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security. And we'll examine that a little bit further later in the show. But I think Evan will be joining us very shortly here. But of course, the reaction from Donald Trump was not exactly positive, was it? But that, of course, is exactly what exactly what what Mark Carney anticipated. He's using this tariff war as a means of distracting your attention. That's what this is all about. And it's amazing to me that Mark Carney thinks, he can get away with this. He can get away with this because he thinks Canadians are that stupid. He knows they were distracted during the election campaign by his rhetoric about Donald Trump being the enemy of the world, the enemy of Canada. And Canada was going to possibly go to war with the United States over tariffs. And this, of course, was all bombastic nonsense. And, he knew that. He knew that exactly. Now I want to show before Eva joins us, I want to show a clip I didn't show yesterday. Remember we were talking about windmills and the utter ineffectiveness of the green energy scam. Well, this is a funny little piece here, and I wanted to show this to you.
Diesel they have to burn to mix that much concrete or make that steel and haul this shit out here and put it together with a 450-foot crane. You want to guess how much oil it takes to lubricate that fucking thing or winterize it? And its 20-year lifespan, it won't offset the carbon footprint of making it. And never mind the fact that if the whole world decided to go electric tomorrow, we don't have the transmission lines to get the electricity to the cities. It'd take 30 years if we started tomorrow. And unfortunately for your grandkids, we have a 120-year petroleum-based infrastructure. Our whole lives depend on it. And hell, it's in everything. That road we came in on, the wheels on every car ever made, including yours, it's in tennis rackets and lipstick and refrigerators and antihistamines, pretty much anything plastic, your cell phone case, artificial heart valves, any kind of clothing that's not made with animal or plant fibers, soap, fucking hand lotion, garbage bags, fishing boats, you name it. Every fucking thing. And you know what the kicker is? We're going to run out of it before we find its replacement.
It's the thing that's going to kill us all as a species.
No, the thing that's going to kill us all is running out before we find an alternative.
Very true. Very, very true. Now I've got another video to show you before Eva joins the show here, and I just got to find it first here. Here we go. Sorry for the delay here, folks. Oh, good news. Eva has joined the show. There we go. Eva, thank you so much for joining me today. And excuse my informality. It's merchandise week at Creighton's Right. So
Oh, fun.
it's a pleasure to have you back. And just wanted to, before we started, I had another clip here from your what I call your Hall of Fame moments, because I really, really enjoyed this being there at the Emergencies Act inquiry and seeing this.
Testified in this inquiry referencing your widely published comments and calling the unvaccinated racists and misogynists. And we have heard testimony in this inquiry about how some of your officials wanted to label protesters as terrorists. Would you agree with me that one of the most important roles of a prime minister is to unite Canadians and not divide them by engaging in name calling?
I did not call people who were unvaccinated names.
That's a classic moment. And I think from that moment on, I said you were on the pantheon of great Canadian heroes. and certainly that was a courageous moment. You put the Prime Minister on the spot, you cornered him, and I think you humiliated Justin Trudeau. So many people remember that clip. Every time I show it, they say, what a moment. But wanted to ask you, Eva, you were recently debanked, I guess the only word we can call it, from the RBC, apparently because of dabbling in cryptocurrency. And most people really didn't buy that because they thought maybe it has something to do with the fact that you were so much a supporter of the Freedom Convoy. You were so effective in supporting Tamara Leech and Chris Barber over the last few years. Do you think it had more to do with politics than anything it had to do with cryptocurrency?
I've been asked that question and I really don't know what to answer. um, and the thing is, I have received so many messages since I posted about that. And it seems like it's not rare. And that's the thing that surprised and shocked me. So many people have written to me saying they got the same letter, no
Oh,
explanation. Some not saying it has anything to do with crypto currency, just a sale of land somewhere else, and then the bank just ended their relationship. And so I really don't know what to say. I think that what it seems like is the banks are really getting away with a lot without providing customers with a lot of information about what they're doing. So that's the concerning part. I don't know what to say about myself particularly. There's, obviously could have been on a list or something like that. Um, But the fact that so many people wrote me is what is concerning and surprising to me.
well, yeah, I guess that's the only response you can have because it is a mystery, and it's interesting. It's interesting to note that you have been contacted by so many other people, and it seems to me the banks maybe are a little out of control. That's
Yeah,
that is the usual.
yeah, yeah, and that's really the concerning part because there's only 5 big banks in Canada. I'm sure they're talking to each other. So it's not like you go to a store in the morning and if one coffee shop says you can't get your coffee here, you go to, the hundreds around. Here you're really limited, and it's not just getting morning coffee. This is about sustaining your life, your ability to have shelter, your ability to buy food. And we saw how devastating that was during the Emergencies Act when people's accounts were frozen for political reasons, and they weren't able to buy medicine for their children, for example. Like, these are not decisions that should be taken lightheartedly. And if you're going to be making that kind of decision, you need to be transparent about it. People need to be able to challenge that, have some due course. Like, even if they said, okay, I mentioned this on another interview, had they said, okay, here's 3 strikes, you're out. Because I've seen a lot of, I'm unfortunately I still believe Canadians are not, I shouldn't say unfortunately, sorry, I take it back. But I still see so many people in Canada cheering on the tyranny, and that is sad. So there were people that were saying, "Yay, I'm glad she was debanked. The bank did their job." Did they though? They could have said, provided some, like, 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out, so that people understand. And that's why there's a whole ombudsman process where you could go and bring a complaint. But the problem with the ombudsman process is that they can't make any changes. They can't affect change on the bank. They just kind of take the complaint, can provide a recommendation, but they have no authority to do anything. So Canadians are just in this loop of very heavily regulated, very um, overarching control from these banks, and you're just kind of a helpless customer that is bound by whatever they decide.
Yeah, that would seem to be completely accurate. Now, I attended the sentencing last week, or the sentencing hearing, excuse me, of Tamara Leech and Chris Barber, and I wrote extensively on this for a number of publications in Canada and the United States. My American editors and my American journalist friends were frankly shocked that any provincial crown would be asking 8 years and the
Mhm.
confiscation of a truck from a peaceful protester and 7 years for Tamara Leach. This was absolutely, I think, a complete overreach. And I'm not for a minute asking you to speculate on whether or not you think the judge is going to concur with the Crown's ask. But would you say that by any definition, where people committing various forms of assault and even murder are getting out of prison after 6 years, would you say this is perhaps an overreach on behalf of the Crown in Ontario?
Yeah, well, I don't think that's hard to say. And I think that the Defense Counsel said that unequivocally, that this was cruel and unusual punishment. That's obvious when we see what's going on with violent repeat offenders. Here we have a case of two individuals that have never been charged with a crime in their life. Here we have a case of two individuals that communicated with the police on a daily basis. And that's the part I want to reinforce is people forget about that. I think, or it's not talked about enough. How do you charge someone and then convict someone, which I do understand they were convicted with mischief, and I hope they appeal. Somebody that's communicating with police authorities on a daily basis. Like, what more do you want citizens to do? It was pure mismanagement and incompetence on the level of government for not talking to their own citizens, which is their job, for neglecting them, for abandoning them. And same with the police authorities. It was incredible mismanagement at every police level and incompetence. Like, if you don't know how to, if you can't manage your own streets, that's your problem. So I understand that citizens in Ottawa were rightfully annoyed, but that should have been directed at the police authorities, at government officials who weren't able to manage a situation that the world knew was coming.
Well, I think Lawrence Greenspan, the attorney for Tamara Leech, didn't miss an opportunity or miss a beat to emphasize how unprecedented, as his words, were the actions of Tamara Leech and Chris Barber in working with the police. He called this unprecedented cooperation. And that didn't seem to faze Justice Heather Perkins McVeigh. But I think it was a very valid point. And were you surprised at one juncture when I believe it was Diane Magus, the attorney for Chris Barber, was discussing how Mr. Barber was affected financially by the Freedom Convoy, the costs, for instance, of transportation back and forth from Saskatchewan to Ottawa, the cost of hotels, the cost of meals. And she also referenced the fact that he had his bank accounts frozen. And Justice Perkins McVeigh expressed astonishment. And I was sitting there right behind Tamara Leach, and she looked over at me, and I looked at people behind me. There was a collective gasp in the courtroom that apparently this judge wasn't aware that Barber or other members of the Freedom Convoy, as well as donors, had their bank accounts frozen. First of all, I'm sure you're aware of this apparent discrepancy, but did you find this surprising?
It's hard to comment. Obviously, I wasn't there, but it is, strange that wasn't within the justice's knowledge. I wasn't there. I'm not really sure what I could say about that. It was, mainstream news. I believe it wasn't just hidden in alternative media, but in any event, the judge can only rely on what was before her at trial. She can't rely on media reports. So I guess it wasn't presented at trial. It's hard to comment when I wasn't there to witness and even participate in the trial itself on how that was missed or what exactly transpired.
Yeah, fair enough. And it wasn't overly reported by the mainstream media. Certainly, it was ignored to a large degree. I was very fortunate to be sitting there at the time, because sometimes you hear the best things when late in the day, and that was very late in the day. But I pointed out this week in a Substack piece, or last week, that all of the trucks that the prosecution, the Crown, was so fixated on Wellington Street. They kept talking about why, these trucks were blocking traffic on Wellington Street. These horrible truckers were blocking traffic. And I pointed out that all of these trucks on Wellington Street were from Quebec and Ontario. Chris Barber hadn't arrived yet. Nobody from Alberta and Saskatchewan had arrived yet. I had arrived because I live in Ottawa. I was there the first night. They were all Quebec and Ontario trucks. And actually, it's interesting. Alberta MLA Brian Jean actually referenced my column this week to say that, hey, I don't think anybody's pointed this out, that these weren't Alberta or Western Canadian trucks. Yet the Ontario government really did very little except sort of penalize them insurance-wise. But they've gone after, the Doug Ford government has gone after two Westerners. You think there's a little bit of an anti-Western bias in this whole trial?
I've pointed that out many times, that it was, I understood it was Quebec truckers that went on to Wellington and blocked the Rideau intersection that was causing a lot of issues. And again, the police didn't manage it when it transpired on Friday night. Tamara and Chris came in on Saturday. And so they were late to the party, as some would say. And I don't know, it could very well be targeting Westerners. I don't know per se, but certainly they were seen and have been deemed the leaders. They had the biggest voice and the biggest reach. But it was such a grassroots movement that grew like wildfire. You cannot control something like that. And again, it was on the police to establish the boundaries, to manage the situation. And in my view, it was again the elected officials and the police that didn't manage it, left citizens to do what it is they ended up doing. And one thing I try to remind people of too, and it kind of goes to that comment, not only did these Westerners come in, is they came to a city that many didn't know. So when there was all this talk about, being in the streets and blocking traffic, they came to Ottawa, were looking for direction from the police, which is how they got all the way to Ottawa. They were guided, escorted. And then when they got to Ottawa, Chris Barber once said to me, and I think he said this other times, they were abandoned by the police. So what are these truckers supposed to do? And all these people that came to Ottawa, they find a spot, they park their car, their truck, and they're there. So they weren't familiar with Ottawa. They weren't there intending to block residents. They just, the police wasn't there directing them and escorting them. So they did the best that they could and they parked where they could. Like, that's another thing people don't understand. We were there, I was there walking with 5 lawyers, and they were always confused as to where things were in Ottawa. I went to law school there, so I was familiar, but like, I was just imagining when a ton of trucks show up in Ottawa and they don't know where to go, what do you expect?
Well, precisely. And I should note that, yes, you have one of the few people who have pointed that out, because it's been ignored by the media in many instances. But I found it interesting, while we had the prosecution or the Crown Counsel last week vilifying both Tamara Leech and Chris Barber as these criminals, outstanding criminals who had committed horrible deeds. We had a visit from an American pastor and musician by the name of Sean Feucht. And I think that visit would have been largely unnoticed by the mainstream media had he not been deplatformed in 6 Canadian cities and essentially told, you can't perform in public, you're a Christian, and you have controversial and divisive views, meaning they're not in tune with the woke politics of the Mark Carney government, provincial governments, or in many cases, municipal governments across Canada. And he was identified as a MAGA supporter and somehow a Trump supporter. And that somehow makes him anathema, even though Donald Trump's the legally elected president of the United States that we are engaged right now in crucial tariff talks with. But mayors across Canada wanted to really get Donald Trump angry over this for some reason. But it's interesting, he's coming back to Canada in August, and he's going to be playing in Edmonton. And my good friend Premier Daniel Smith has invited him to perform at the steps of the provincial legislature in Edmonton. What a difference. And I have to say that because I just find that to be emblematic of a true conservative, a true principled conservative like Danielle and these woke mayors in central and eastern Canada. But given the fact that so many Liberal MPs went on their ex posts and said, "Good, you're deplatforming this Christian. He doesn't deserve to perform in Canada. He knows Donald Trump. He's pro-life. He doesn't agree with our woke politics." How safe is freedom of religion in Canada? Because we know free speech is incredibly endangered. We know freedom of assembly is incredibly endangered after this trial of Tamara and Chris. But is freedom of religion even safe anymore in this country after this?
I think you answered your own question. What I try to highlight to people is this is not the Canada that I grew up in and that I aspire to live in, where we put on the face of being kind and inclusive, and that at any moment something doesn't agree with us or the media says we shouldn't like somebody, we turn to hatred, we turn to division, we turn to fear. What kind of Canada are we showing the world that we are? Once a country that, was labeled for being nice. We're like the cruelest people. If you don't disagree with somebody's politics, you want them deplatformed, you want them debanked, you want them censored, you want them silenced. And it doesn't matter whether it's religious expression or political expression, it just toe the line or get out of here. And that's all I'm seeing in Canada. And I put this back on politicians. Our elected officials, our leaders are the ones that started this narrative, and the Liberals and the NDP excellent at this, at really stoking the flames. And then I've called the Conservatives out on this, is they didn't put the facts down straight. Nobody was overthrowing the government. That narrative should have ended the first day it started, but nobody stood up in a position of power and influence. And they didn't want to be labeled as sympathizers. All it was is correcting the record. Same with this. Now we're starting to see some conservative leaders finally setting the record straight in the case of this Christian singer. And we need more of that. And I also have challenged and called on the legal profession to do the same. Don't amplify these feelings over facts messages, because that distorts the rule of law. It breaks our free and democratic society. And it's just not something we should be doing. And we've been doing it. People have been doing this with vigor and being celebrated when they're tearing people down. And I just can't believe this is happening in Canada. So I'm doing my best to call it out and say, wait a second, that doesn't seem like that's the case. Let's have a discussion about that. And I'm trying to encourage other people to do the same.
I was somewhat disappointed that Pierre Poilievre did not say anything about this. And of course, he had finally spoken up about the injustice of the potential sentence for Chris Barber and Tamara Leech in an ex post, which I think was way overdue. But he said nothing about Sean Feucht, and he still said nothing about Sean Feucht. I know he's very busy knocking on doors in Battle River Crowfoot. I think he possibly could have said something, because Pierre Poilievre is not running for prime minister right now. He's running for a by-election seat in probably the most conservative riding in the country. And he probably could have spoken out in favor of Sean Feucht without any danger of being criticized for being too extreme. But he chose not to. I'm wondering if what are your thoughts overall about this ridiculous by-election in terms of over 200 candidates running, and now Elections Canada saying just fill in the blank and we'll decide whether or not it looks like Pierre Poilievre or not. And I find that very problematic and potentially dangerous, given all of the irregularities we had in the last federal election, with polling stations closing early and ballot boxes being moved around and multiple recounts. Do you think that's a solution, to have sort of write his name in and we'll decide whether it looks like pure poly or not?
I don't know exactly what to say there. Those are the current rules. They could have been changed. I'm going to have to leave probably after this one, just to let you know. But what I would, you started talking about Pierre Poilievre not responding and reacting to, and the long ballot. But what I'm seeing, and again, what I'm trying to help Canadians see, is we can't continue to react to every situation. That's not a healthy place to be. So whether it's reacting to this Christian singer from America, the United States, or reacting to the longest ballot, we need to see leaders showing a vision of what they want to see this country be. I'm incredibly tired of it. Like, I don't think that Pierre should be responding to these things, but that's where we are right now, because we don't know what's going on. Like, Canada is a bit lost right now. I think that's pretty clear. And there doesn't seem to be a handle on what's going on. People are confused. So we need some serious leadership with some vision, some mission that Canadians can, get behind, because I'm not interested in continuously reacting to situations. I want a leader that can show us the way, and that we can get on board with. So that, in terms of all the other issues, that would be my response.
Have you got time for one last quick
Sure.
one here? I've had Jeff Rath on the show multiple times, the Alberta Prosperity Project Council. And I thought the plan that that group put out in terms of the economic feasibility of an independent Alberta was extremely positive and extremely articulate and extremely effective in terms of spelling that out. Without asking your personal opinion on whether independence is a good or a bad thing, do you think it's potentially something that's going to happen in Alberta in the next year?
Separation?
Yes. Do you
In a
think it's
year,
potential?
impossible. Just because of all of.
But I mean, do you think if there's a referendum within the next year, do you think that referendum will be in favor of Alberta independence, or whether it will fail?
There's a lot of talk about it. The issue is not dying. It's only getting louder. And with the tyrannical and the overreaching governments that we're seeing, like, it's no surprise that Albertans are feeling frustrated and have had enough of the relationship. So, I could see why people are saying, I don't know what's going to happen, but the only thing that could happen within this next year is a referendum, which takes a lot of work. Already the Elections Alberta has already brought the petition to court, so there's already a court application on it. And then this is just the beginning. And if there's any actual separation, that will take a lot of effort and a lot of negotiation between the provincial government of Alberta and the federal government of Canada.
Thank you for your time, Eva. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to hear your advice, your philosophy on these important issues, current events. I know you're busy. Thank you for joining us, and we'll stay in touch.
My pleasure. Take care, David.
Bye for now. That, of course, was Eva Chipiuk, an outstanding Alberta lawyer who always fights for free speech. And I've got a clip here, and I've got to download for you. I'm sorry for the. There we go. Here we go.
But
that, of course, is the usual articulate Mark Carney responding to questions about why he would introduce the independent Palestinian state concept when Donald Trump is literally hours away from deciding about tariffs. I mean, this is absolute insanity. But let's watch this again.
it, but the
And that, of course, is the letter announcing.
Speaking of the
That, of course, was the letter I showed you earlier. This is Mark Carney saying Canada now supports a free and independent Palestinian state. And without saying whether or not the two-state solution is going to be a solution or not to the Middle East problems, and without commenting further on what I think has been some horrible actions and behavior from Israel during this time. This is timing-wise, this is an abominable time to introduce this letter. Carney knew this was going to upset and offend Donald Trump at a crucial period in tariff negotiations. Now, why do you suppose he would do that? Because Mark Carney enjoys a crisis, just like Justin Trudeau enjoys a crisis, because it's an opportunity for him to distract you from everything that's happening. It's an opportunity for him to distract you from the real politics and from what? His conflicts of interest. And of course, we've got reports now that he's going to reintroduce the capital gains tax. But don't look too closely because you might miss it. Remember, this is a prime minister who's operating without a budget. And he wants to have two budgets. He wants to have like the real budget and the black budget. He wants an operating budget so he can hide the expenses. He wants two sets of books. And this is what Mark Carney is all about.
United States, did you consult with the U.S. about your decision to recognize Palestine? And can the sustainable peace process work without U.S. being on side?
Look, the United States is the essential partner in peace in the Middle East, and in virtually in many parts of the world. And we've seen that demonstrated. First point. Second point is that the president.
I don't think he made a first point. Do you? I have never seen a more inarticulate prime minister or political leader in history, perhaps. He's incapable of even expressing what he means. What is he saying? What is he trying to say here? Yes, United States is in control of the process, so I'm deliberately going to tweak their nose right before the tariffs are announced. Insane.
Does take a direct interest in resolving conflicts, and as has with respect to a broader set of developments in the Middle East. And so again, the United States, this president, will play and continue to play a central role. Others have responsibilities, Canada included, responsibilities on the humanitarian side, responsibilities with governance and other aspects that we're supporting. And we make our own independent foreign policy positions. And when we see opportunities, when we see necessity, which is what we see in this case, given the retreat of the prospect of a two-state solution because of the facts on the ground, as I explained, when we see that possibility and we see the combination of an ability to influence because of our own voice and actions, but because of others and other processes that are being put in place. But to be absolutely clear, and I'll finish on this point, which is, I referenced earlier an E3 plan, that early stages peace plan. I talked to Prime Minister Starmer about it, President Macron as well today. Prime Minister Starmer, in this public domain, briefed the President of the United States about the plan a few days ago. So there are connections all the way through, and my colleague's obviously in regular contact with her, homologue. Sorry. Yeah.
You said you came to this decision independently, so you're saying you would have come to this without France or the UK making this decision?
No, look, I meant independent of the United States. But yes, it does matter that others are moving. It does matter because it increases the prospect of success.
this is painful to watch because this is a man who's not only incapable of expressing himself in anything approaching an articulate manner, he's obviously not got a plan here. And this is obviously something he's done at the behest and demand of the Europeans, of Macron and Herr Keir Starmer. This is him. This is Mark Carney paying obeisance to his European masters. And once again, tweaking the nose of Donald Trump when he's not in his presence. When he's in Donald Trump's presence, he's on his knees in a worshipful position, telling Donald Trump he's a transformational president and the greatest man. Mark Carney, this should embarrass Canadians to watch this man try to express why he made this decision, because he can't do it.
To this without France or the UK
No,
making this decision?
No, look, I mean independent of the United States. But yes, it does matter that others are moving. It does matter because it increases the prospect of success. But the core of the decision is taken on the principle that of self-determination and the rights of people to self-determination. We have long, Canada, speaking for Canada now, have long felt that this should come later in a process, and that our recognitions, other recognitions, the state of Palestine, should come at a point of maximum impact during a peace process. We're now at a position, I'm sorry to repeat myself, where in our judgment and the judgment of others, is that the prospect of a Palestinian state is literally receding before our eyes, or being eroded before our eyes. And so the act of the intention to recognize, which is what we're saying today, and working with others to support a Palestinian state, possibility of a Palestinian state, reestablishes that opportunity.
David Turton, CBC.
Hi.
Wow, here's Donald Trump's statement on Truth Social. Wow, Canada has just announced that it is backing statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them. Oh, Canada. Yep. Incredible. And that's where we are today with this. When I come back, I've got a few more comments about the state of the world, upcoming events, and what you can't miss on this station. Yes, please have a look at our merchandise in the store. We're quite proud of it. I think it's some of the best merchandise out there. Very proud of it. Yes, I will be getting a haircut next week. I know it's embarrassing. That's why I'm wearing a hat, actually. However, folk, Sean Feucht will be on the show next week, slated for Thursday, time to be determined. We might have to show the interview the following day, depending upon the time. But this is going to be one heck of an interview to watch, and I encourage you to be there for that. And interesting to listen to Eva Chipiuk today, because she is clearly of two minds about in terms of Alberta independence. I did not ask her for her personal opinion on it, But she's clearly telling me today that she believes the impetus and the momentum is behind that referendum in terms of it being a yes vote for independence, or a no vote if it turns out that way for continued membership in Canada. So this is all very interesting. The times, they are a changing, folks, to quote the old Bob Dylan song from the 1960s. We are in an age of rapid change, and we have to be very careful who we believe, because we're getting distracted constantly. Mark Carney distracts Canadians. He's an expert at it. And even though he does a news conference like this where he appears to be a bumbling, stumbling fool, he's still got a high approval rating. Apparently, pollsters are giving him a very high approval rating. I don't understand it. You don't understand it. That's why we're doing this show, to keep the pressure on Carney, people like Doug Ford, people like the mayor of Montreal, to bring back freedom to this country. And that's what Pierre Poilievre has to remember. Bring it back, to bring this country back to freedom. That's what it should be all about. Thank you for watching. This has been David Creighton broadcasting to you live from Ottawa. I'll be back again tomorrow with more of the news you need to know.